Hey guys, PieGuyRulz here, and welcome back to every episode of SpongeBob Reviewed. Today we aren't actually going to be talking about any episodes, really. We've got a movie to cover, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the characters and how they've been established so far, and I have my reasons for doing this, but let's get the movie out of the way first. So I saw the movie initially when it came out in theaters, and since then, I've seen it a number of times on TV, DVD, iTunes, etc. The movie will always hold a special place in my heart, as it came in a time when I enjoyed all movies, before I became the critical cynic that I am today. It was also the last in a long tradition of turning Nick cartoons into theatrical movies, aside from the Shyamalama bomb, but we don't talk about that, and it wasn't even animated. It's actually pretty telling that Nick hasn't found another show that deserves a full animated movie since SpongeBob, aside from SpongeBob, which is actually getting the sequel. Anyway, this is all a roundabout way to say that no matter what criticisms I offer or what I end up rating it, I will always love this movie as a guilty pleasure, as it just holds so much to my childhood. So the very basic plot of the film is that Plankton steals King Neptune's crown and pins it on Mr. Krabs, and in order to clear his name, SpongeBob and Patrick must journey to the far-off land of Shell City to get back King Neptune's crown and prove Mr. Krabs' innocence, while Plankton takes over the town and sends an assassin after SpongeBob and Patrick. This movie has a sizable amount of problems. Firstly, I hate what they did to Plankton here. They turned him into such a generic, bland villain. I liked him in the show because A, he is a large ham, well, a tiny ham, but you know what I mean. And B, his goal was petty. He never wanted world domination, he just wanted to steal the stupid formula. And yes, in the show he identified himself as being evil, but come on, it was all about the Krabby Patty. That's part of the joke, it's petty. It's not out of character per se, but it seems a bit forced. And although he's technically the main villain, he has an incredibly small part. Did I really write that? Oh god. But seriously, this brings me to another major problem with this movie. They gave the side characters absolutely nothing to do. SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, Plankton are the only characters from the show that do anything. On top of that, Mr. Krabs is frozen most of the movie. Plankton, while being the big bad, isn't actually on the screen most of the time, or the most threatening villain for that matter. Pearl gets one line in a crowd scene, Sandy and Mrs. Puff get two small lines, and half of them are explanations in a montage. Squidward gets a few and then bows out of the movie till the end. Seriously, Karen gets more lines than most of these supposed main and side characters. Now this is all explained away by Plankton mind controlling them mid-movie, but there is literally no reason why somebody like Sandy or Squidward couldn't have tagged along on Sponge and Pat's journey. I guess it might ruin the whole not being a kid story arc, but here's the crazy thing. It is so easy to come up with something for them to do. I figured it out in 5 minutes. Make them form a resistance. Squidward's smart enough to put together Plankton's plan, and then he falls right into a trap. Instead, why not have him put together a resistance with Sandy for muscle and brain, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy for their powers, Mrs. Puff for her driving ability and cool car, and Gary because, I don't know, Gary. You could have a clever action sequence, and it would give them something to do. And they could fail, further proving that the adult characters need the kids to save them, thus furthering the theme. I'm not just writing a crazy fanfic here, right? This seems like a very obvious move that they could have made and chose not to. Heck, maybe it was in an original script somewhere and had to be scrapped for time. Although that's not a very good excuse because there are some sections of SpongeBob and Patrick's journey that really could be cut for time. The whole part where they run into what they think is an old lady and it turns out to be a giant monster. Yeah, it was cool, I guess, but when you have them running into so many other monsters and bad guys and problems, that part could have been cut. Some of their journeying gets a little bit long, but it's not just giving these main characters nothing to do. They basically brought in new characters to fill in roles that were already kind of filled in the series. As much as I love Dennis, I feel like the movie would be a lot cooler if it featured some of the bad guys we've seen in the show, like Flats or the Strangler or Bubble Bass, the Dirty Bubble, Man Ray. I mean, the show already had bad guys, why not have them all get together or something? And they arbitrarily changed King Neptune. He's similar enough in character, but slightly different, and they changed his face and hair, and I don't understand why. So that's my biggest problem with the movie. I feel like it squanders the characters we know and love. Another problem I had with the movie? It seemed a bit immature, even for SpongeBob. there was a lot of butt jokes and underwear jokes and that sort of thing. Don't get me wrong, there's a fair bit of intelligent humor, and hey, SpongeBob delves into toilet humor every so often, but I feel like the jokes are overused in the movie and not quite as funny. Another big problem, and this is more of a film thing, the ending is a total Deus Ex Machina. Like, SpongeBob playing the guitar to save everyone, like, it comes out of nowhere. Honestly, if SpongeBob had won the guitar in, like, some sort of game at the Goofy Goober earlier in the film and foreshadowed it, it would make some sort of sense, but as it stands, it just comes out of nowhere. And it's not like it even has to make sense why the music breaks the helmets and everything, frequencies and all that. It's more or less just that it comes out of nowhere. Yes, in the show we've seen that SpongeBob has musical abilities, and heck, even in the recent SpongeBob Christmas, his music abilities saved the day. But it needed some foreshadowing, it needed something towards the beginning of the film to show this was going to be the ending, that sets up the guitar, that sets up the musical ability, that sets this up, because it comes out of nowhere. And I understand that the music number is hilarious, and it's a good music number, and it's a great set piece, but it needs to have some sort of cause to lead to this effect. It doesn't matter that he pulls it out of the back of his back through hammer space or whatever. I don't care about that. We're not talking about that kind of logic. We're talking about film logic where it needs to be established first for it to be brought back later in the film. But that's enough negatives. There are some things to compliment the film for. It does a good job of taking SpongeBob and bringing it to the big screen. I mean, think about it. SpongeBob goes through the hero's journey. He goes on an adventure. He proves something. It takes the show and escalates it. What is something that we rarely get to see in the TV show that happens in the movie? SpongeBob and Patrick leaving Bikini Bottom. We rarely get to see that. Yeah, there was Rock Bottom, and SpongeBob and Patrick went away, and I was a teenage Gary, but we didn't get to see that. And then later TV movies will have them going to places like Atlantis and wherever the big one is. But seriously, it's not very often that we get to see them leave Bikini Bottom, so it feels special, it feels epic, it feels like something that belongs in a movie. Just for fun and to prove how much the movie has to do with the show, I decided to keep track on a list of all these sort of little references and callbacks the movie has to the TV show. So we've got Neptune Spatula, which obviously introduces Neptune, although we see a different Neptune here. He's quite similar. In the episode Hooky, we get the whole gift shop joke, and we learn that the size of these sea creatures is kinda tiny. In Grandma's Kisses, we get the analogy of manually facial hair representing becoming an adult. In Krusty Love, we get the pufferfish lamp, which actually we see pufferfish lamps in the gift shop in the movie. In As Seen on TV, we get the concept of a second Krusty Krab. And of course, Tea at the Tree Dome, and that SpongeBob almost dries up in this movie. In Shanghai, we get to see Patrick's negotiating skills, like in this movie, as well as also in Neptune Spatula and how bad they are. In Born Again Crabs, SpongeBob stands up for Mr. Krabs against the Flying Dutchman, which is not dissimilar to what happens in the movie with King Neptune. And lastly, I think the episode that influenced this movie the most, and is actually kind of like a mini version of the movie if you think about it, is No Weenies Allowed. I mean, think about it. They've got the tough guy bar, and the guy that won't let SpongeBob in is actually voiced by Thomas F. Wilson, and so is the leader in the tough guy bar in this movie. They've also got the Weenie bar, which for some reason, they have Goofy Goober in the movie. I'm not entirely sure why they did that. I think Weenie Hut Jr. would have worked just as well and been a nice reference to the show, but whatever. And they also have the bowl of nails joke, which you see a tough guy in the tough guy bar in the movie eating a bowl of nails, and no, he does not have any milk. And I'm sure those aren't the only references. So yeah, I think it represented the show pretty dang well, and as much as I groan at some of the toilet humor, there is a lot of memorable quotes from the movie, and things that are just uniquely SpongeBob. Hey, you don't need a license to drive a sandwich, guys. On the technical side of things, the animation looks pretty good. It looks like your average SpongeBob episode, but really ramped up. They don't try anything crazy, but some of the things that they do with the animation, like designs for the monsters and the bubbles and the bad guys at the bad guy bar, all those designs and animations are pretty good and high quality. The sound is great, although I really have to question why they pitched up SpongeBob's voice. This is something that I have a feeling we'll be talking about very soon, but it just feels unnecessary and slightly off. It's not very distracting, but it's enough that if you're a big fan of the show, you'll notice. So you want to know a fun fact? Well, it's not necessarily too fun. See, the SpongeBob movie came out a year after Finding Nemo. Yeah, I was around, and I saw these both in theaters, and I didn't think about it until now, but those movies came out surprisingly close together. I mean, how many movies do you have about anthropomorphic sea creatures going on a journey, taking place slightly above water for a small portion of the movie, but mostly under the water, searching on a journey to go and find something, to save someone? I'm not saying they're the same movie, but there's a lot of similarities, and as much as I love the SpongeBob movie, Finding Nemo is a masterpiece. It must have been really hard for them to compete. I mean, a year is a little bit of a difference, but it's not that much, and I can't help but think that a lot of the reviewers and critics and just general moviegoers at the time had that movie fresh in their minds when going to see this one, and I can't say that it helped it. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that one scene in Shell City. You know what I'm talking about. That sad scene that just, I don't know what it is, but I'm man enough to admit it. I cry during that scene pretty much every single time I see it. I don't know why. Obviously, SpongeBob and Patrick are gonna make it out fine. I knew this even when I originally watched it, but just something inside of me got so attached to these lovable goofball characters throughout the show and the movies that just seeing them almost die in a way that you'll never see in the show. There's never any real consequences like that in the show, but seeing it on the big screen, them not just dying, but kind of drying up and transforming from cartoons to just the real sad equivalents of what they are in the real world, it's just so sad. It gets me. It's a very emotional scene and is very well done. I would never have guessed that SpongeBob, of all things, could evoke such an emotion out of me, but it does every single time. And just for consistency, we have movie number 1, P. Yeah, Patchy isn't in the movie. However, these random pirates are, and they act a lot like Patchy. They're over the top, they overuse the pirate gimmick, and they're not particularly that funny. Patchy's another character that somehow got replaced in this movie. Again, these pirates serve pretty much the same purpose as Patchy. I mean, they look a little bit more like legitimate pirates than he does, but they're still over the top and not like actual pirates. It would have been cool to have him at least be a background pirate in the scene. The pirates only have a few scenes, and I do kind of like the opening where they're all over the top and dancing around, singing the SpongeBob theme as a sea shanty. But I have to say, it really does kill the mood during that really awesome and dramatic scene of SpongeBob and Patrick to cut back to these pirates and they're all blubbering. I mean, it kind of makes fun of me for actually getting emotional about the dang scene when you have these stupid overacting pirates do it as well. It kind of ruins the tension a little bit, although I suppose something had to be put there to break up that part of the movie, but I feel like they weren't necessary. They didn't add anything. They weren't funny. They were alright. They're like Patchy in the Patchy episodes that aren't particularly great. So, what am I gonna rate this movie? Is it good? Is it SpongeBob? Is it meh? Well, here's the thing. There's a lot of things going for this movie, and it represents SpongeBob pretty well, but at the same time, there are some serious flaws and some serious things that are just missing from the movie, both from a film standpoint and from a SpongeBob fan standpoint. So I don't know if in good conscience I could call it a good movie, although it's enjoyable enough, so I don't know. It's definitely not SpongeBob, but, I want you guys to know that I thought long and hard about this one, but putting together from the average SpongeBob fan's perspective mixed with the average filmgoer's perspective, rating it as both a film and an extension of the television show, I have to call it meh. listen, guys, like I said, I love this movie. I could watch it 100,000 times, and I'm sure a lot of you can as well. But if I'm being honest, as both a film critic and someone expecting things out of the SpongeBob movie, it just didn't live up to all my expectations. It could have been better. And that's the difference between good and average. Average is complacent, and I call it meh because I'm quirky like that, but that's what it is. It's average. It's the average ranking. There's nothing awful about it. It's watchable. There are good parts, but it is not taking things one step beyond. But it's still a fantastic movie, and I still highly recommend it. If you're into SpongeBob at all, you're gonna love it, and if not, I don't know that there's enough in this movie there for you, but you'll get at least a few laughs out of it. If you don't like that rating, well, then at least we can all agree that The Last Airbender movie was really, really terrible. So, that's order of business number 1. Order of business number 2, we will be talking about the characters in SpongeBob and how they have acted up to this point. And I do this not necessarily because I want to point out inconsistencies coming up in future episodes. I just want to establish what SpongeBob seasons 1 through 3 was, so that we have legitimate things to compare and contrast to, so that if we were to look at an episode and say, well, he's acting out of character, I can say either yes or no, because we're putting it down right now, what is quote-unquote in character and what is quote-unquote out of character. It doesn't all particularly matter because, hey, even in seasons 1 through 3, characters acted out of character. As long as it's a joke and as long as it's funny enough, I don't care. But still, it's good to establish what the show is, because I have a point that I'm going to make at the end of this, and I hope it will help explain to those of you that really love the new SpongeBob and can't quite understand why some of us are very cynical about it. I have a point, and I'll get to it. But first, let's talk about the characters. So I asked some people on SpongeBuddy Mania, a SpongeBob forum, to help me in analyzing some of these characters as they've acted in seasons 1 through 3. So before I give my analysis on the character, I'll read out, paraphrase, a few of what people have submitted to me. So first up, we have SpongeBob SquarePants. Halibut says, SpongeBob is one of the most innocent characters on the show. He has many passions in life. There are many examples. The obvious one is the Krusty Krab. He has said before in Squid on Strike, grilling is my passion. And that's true. He doesn't always work, though. He also enjoys jellyfishing, bubble blowing, and just hanging out with loving friends. He'll even try to make friends that don't want to be friends back, like Squidward or Flats. Ultimately, he needs love to thrive. Another example is the episode Dumped. Gary dumps SpongeBob for Patrick, and SpongeBob wrecks himself trying to get Gary back. His innocence is one of his biggest traits, and the smoking peanut he admits to being the one who freaked out the oyster, even though, of course, it was Mr. Krabs. He has 2 priorities in life, working and having fun. That's all people need as a priority. They work to help themselves and have fun afterwards. SpongeBob is the perfect example of a good person. SpongeRody UK wrote, SpongeBob is a cartoon character that is significantly designed to attract and encourage a younger audience to watch the show. He resembles the nice guy stereotype, a guy that feels grateful about everything in life, a guy that loves his job, his boss, his mates, and even Squidward. His innocence is portrayed magnificently in some pre-movie episodes like Nasty Patty or The Smoking Peanut. His childish charisma, shown in episodes such as Help Wanted, is always a refreshing sight for kids to see, although it's not always obnoxious happiness with SpongeBob. Episodes such as The Great Snail Race and Employee of the Month shows that SpongeBob has his own negative charisma. His confidence can stretch to arrogance, and his commitment and competitiveness can be ruthless, but those traits help SpongeBob to be fresh as a character. He has depth in character, which means he makes the whole show more flexible and keeps his obliviousness in moderation. Such a lovable individual. I agree completely. SpongeBob is a great role model. He's nice to everyone, always optimistic, and works hard. But he has his limits. I think the few times that we actually see him explode are times when it's justified, like when Squid actually freeloads in SpongeBob's house. He pushes SpongeBob's good nature way too far, and SpongeBob justifiably snaps back. He will get angry, he will get pushed too far, and yeah, confidence can get the better of him, but he has to be pushed. It has to take a lot for SpongeBob to sink down to that level. He is not easily agitated. Never, ever, ever. That is one thing that I can say solidly about the character, is that he is happy to a fault, and it takes a lot to take him out of that. Now, as I talk about these characters, you'll notice that I bring it back to SpongeBob a lot, because a lot of the show hinges on how these other characters mesh with the main character. Aside from a very few episodes, SpongeBob is the main character, and I think every episode has him in it. So the other characters can be defined partially in how they relate to SpongeBob, just as much as they can be defined as characters in their own rights. So you'll see me talk about how the characters relate to SpongeBob quite a bit. Alright, now on to Patrick. So Christmas is Awesome 22 says, Patrick Star seems to do a lot in seasons 1 through 3. He's inactive, but sometimes he gets active. Look at Big Pink Loser for a great example. Patrick has worked at the Krusty Krab. He hasn't done a lot of other things, but he's met his parents. Patrick loves Krabby Patties, jellyfishing, playing on hooks, and many more. SpongeRody UK says, Patrick has the ability to show off his subtle idiocy with excellent timing. His stupidity is always in moderation and feels genuine throughout. Moments such as, is mayo an instrument? Wumbo, are examples of how Patrick is an honest idiot. Most of the time he knows the problem, but couldn't direct his brain to find a reasonable and rational solution, which often leads to a blind Patrick leading the blind SpongeBob situation. Played straight in episodes such as Tea at the Tree Dome, Patrick was always a character able to show his limited intelligence with beautifully crafted jokes with perfect timing, which mainly generate from the fact that he couldn't understand any situation. A perfect foil for a number 2. SpongeRody kind of has it, where Patrick isn't just an idiot. He's someone who doesn't quite grasp any sort of situation that's going on around him. He thinks he knows what he's doing, but he really doesn't. He uses what I consider to be a stupid person's logic. He doesn't just say random non sequiturs, he says things that he thinks applies to the situation, even though it doesn't at all. He's like a stupid person trying to seem like a smart person. That's because SpongeBob trusts Patrick as somewhat of a mentor. He frequently goes to Patrick for advice, and Patrick continuously gives him stupid advice, which of course gets SpongeBob in trouble. Which leads me back to, SpongeBob is not necessarily an idiot, he is just incredibly gullible. The defining character trait of SpongeBob is that he's gullible, and because of Patrick, SpongeBob is stupid. I also like that Patrick has the character trait of being jealous of SpongeBob sometimes, because, let's be honest, SpongeBob is a really determined worker, and Patrick isn't. It'd be natural for Patrick to be jealous of what SpongeBob has, because Patrick could never achieve it in a million years. SpongeBob will never realize that Patrick gives bad advice, because SpongeBob trusts him wholeheartedly, and Patrick never means to steer SpongeBob wrong. So to sum up Patrick, I would say that he's a well-intentioned idiot who has no idea of his surroundings and is incredibly lazy. Now on to Squidward. Ling Ling says he will be known as one of the world's most underrated talents. He makes music and art like nobody else has ever done, and is well fascinated by his work. Unfortunately, he is always being bothered by the moronic duo such as SpongeBob and Patrick. All they do is distract him from doing what he wants. He tries to avoid any type of contact with them, but to no avail. It should also be mentioned that he is the cashier of the Krusty Krab, which, thanks to SpongeBob being the fry cook, and the owner of which being a complete cheapskate, is not better than being at home. Please try to be nice with him. And to that I say, Squidward's mom, you make some pretty terrible cookies. SpongeRody UK says Squidward is the perfect character because he portrays most people living in the modern world, mostly grumpy, slacky, and disgruntled. He's mainly mean, but he can show sympathy. The ending of Pizza Delivery, most of Fools in April, and his Santa cameo in Christmas Who shows that he can be a compassionate individual. And since he's a disgruntled old guy for most of the time, his compassionate acts are always authentic and genuine. He's also a boastful, competitive man, which means he is the exact opposite of SpongeBob. Sometimes the difference in character could create the perfect chemistry for an episode, like Employee of the Month or The Paper, but sometimes it could produce a rather offending episode, like Club SpongeBob or the camping episode. I disagree with you on those two episodes, but that's a discussion for another time. So here's my interpretation on Squidward. He's a grumpy guy that doesn't know what he wants. Time and time again, it shows that when he does bring himself down to SpongeBob level, he actually does have fun, even though he could never admit it to SpongeBob, and always has to put himself above everyone else because he thinks he's better. He thinks he's more complex and more sophisticated when really he's not. In most episodes, his artwork and music is actually terrible, although there's been a few strange examples where he plays the clarinet just fine. Usually it's pretty bad. Squidward thinks he'd be just fine without SpongeBob, but as seen in a number of episodes, and most prominently in Squidville, Squidward needs SpongeBob to spice up his life. but he doesn't always realize it. In fact, he pretty much never realizes it until the end of the episode. It's a lesson that he continues to learn and will always be reset by the beginning of the next episode. However, here's where my interpretation might be a little bit different from most. I don't think deep down he actually likes SpongeBob. I think deep down he really does not like the little yellow guy. However, I think his moments of compassion are just empathy. I don't think Squidward wants to be a bad person. Yeah, he's grumpy, yeah, he's selfish, yeah, he's a bad guy in a lot of regards, but he doesn't want to be a bad person. He doesn't really want to hurt anyone else's feelings, and he doesn't want SpongeBob to die when he accidentally feeds him the poison pie, or so he thinks. He wants SpongeBob to live because he's not a murderer. I just think he's trying to be a decent guy, but I really don't think deep down he likes SpongeBob, which I find even funnier. This is how I like Squidward. Grumpy, never knowing what he actually wants from life, and not genuinely mean-spirited. Now on to Gary. Duwapasaurus says, well, Gary doesn't have much of a personality in these 3 seasons. There were very few episodes starring him, and the ones that didn't tell us much about his character. It almost seemed as if he wasn't really there. All we could really tell is that he loves SpongeBob and acts in a similar manner as a cat. See, this is the thing that always baffles me about Gary. The show seems to think he's a lot more important than he really is. Like, the show seems to categorize him as a main character when, as a pet, he doesn't really do much. He does star in a few episodes, like Gary Takes a Bath, and he's got a prominent role in Sleepy Time, but he doesn't do that much. There are a lot of episodes just without him, and some episodes where he's there, but he really doesn't do anything. Gary also seems to be a fairly inconsistent character. In episodes like Sleepy Time, he's very intelligent, at least in his dreams, and he shows to be a lot wiser than SpongeBob, but in most episodes, he's pretty much just a pet, and even more than that, he's just someone for SpongeBob to talk to in his house. He wavers between actually being, like, the most intelligent character on the show and just being a fairly smart house pet, which makes his characterization kind of weird, because in Dumped, he actually kind of leaves SpongeBob for a cookie, but that's what a pet would do, so I don't really think it's a mean-spirited thing or any sort of character moment. I just think the pet would want the food in Patrick's pants. And in Gary Takes a Bath, Gary really makes a fool of SpongeBob, although you could say that that's all in good fun. So to sum it up, Gary is either the most intelligent character on the show or just a fairly average house pet, depending on the episode. Next up, Eugene H. Krabs. Milkmaid Man says, Mr. Krabs is the owner of the Krusty Krab and well known for his obsession with money. In seasons 1 through 3, he acts as a father figure to SpongeBob. An example of this is Hooky, when he tried to keep SpongeBob and Patrick from being eaten or put in gift shops by humans. But also, he can be a very cheap person. For example, in Can You Spare a Dime, he accuses Squidward of taking his first dime, and this causes Squidward to quit his job. Of course, Mr. Krabs loves getting money and hates losing money, and losing his fry cook SpongeBob, because without him, the Krusty Krab is a wreck. Oh boy, is Mr. Krabs an interesting character to talk about. In seasons 1 through 3, I liken Mr. Krabs' behavior, about 98% of the time at least, to being that of a really cheap, regular, grounded person. Yes, he loves money. He really does. However, he does also have other priorities. He cares about his daughter, he had a date with Mrs. Puff, and in most episodes, he seems to value SpongeBob above money. Now, this might just be because SpongeBob makes him money, or it might be because he genuinely cares about the little yellow guy. However, there are episodes like Born Again Krabs that do show, in some times, Mr. Krabs just is reduced to one-dimensional, I like money. And that is bad because it's not fun to watch, it's not a three-dimensional character, it's just one joke, and it's Flanderization. Flanderization, if you don't know, is basically boiling a complex character down into one primary subject and just pushing that joke really, really hard. And the thing about it is, it escalates because you have Mr. Krabs being cheap in season 1. Then season 2, you want to top it and have him be even more cheap by doing something. And eventually it does get to the point of Born Again Krabs where the only way to have it shocking is just to go all the way. But then once you've gone as far as that, it's not shocking anymore. It's not funny anymore. And really what you should do is pull it back and make the character complex again. Because when you see him and he's not super obnoxiously cheap, it almost seems out of character. It almost seems like the new norm for the character is to just be money is priority above everything else, and that's not what Mr. Krabs originally was. And there is a good way to balance the character. For instance, One Krabs Trash is a hilarious episode, and Mr. Krabs is cheap, but he doesn't really harm anyone in the process. And I think that's kind of the balance. You can have the character being really, really cheap, but the moment he starts to become an antagonist and starts to become one-dimensionally an antagonist, you really have to start questioning if the character has developed in the right way. And I think episodes like Jellyfish Hunter can also work, where he is the antagonist, but they justify it a little bit more, and they give him comeuppance in the end. He's clearly supposed to be an antagonist in the episode, not just someone who's obnoxiously cheap. And I think a lot of it also depends on whether or not it's fun. Is it fun when Mr. Krabs goes crazy and arg and tries to take all the treasure for himself? Yes. Is it funny when Mr. Krabs is being a swashbuckling grave robber? Yes. Is it funny when he does it in something like Krabby Land? Not necessarily. He just comes off as a one-dimensional, boring, stereotypical villain. It's a fairly predictable episode anyway. So at his best, Mr. Krabs is a kind, caring individual who likes money a lot and works hard to earn it. At his worst, he's someone who doesn't value human or fish lives at all and basically puts money above literally everything else and will sell people's souls for a nickel. And yes, there are examples of this, even in the Hillenburg era. Alright, now onto Sandy Cheeks. No one actually sent me in anything for her, so I guess I'm on my own here. She's appeared in the least amount of episodes, aside from Plankton, of the main characters in the first 3 seasons, so there's not a ton to go on, but she appears enough, and she's a main character, so I guess there's something to talk about here. She's from Texas, and she's very much into karate, which is what she and SpongeBob are most often seen doing. She is definitely a very active person. She likes extreme sports, she likes getting into fights, she likes wrestling sea critters. She's a very physical person, and she's very strong. However, she's also very bright. She is very much more intelligent than most of the other characters on the show. Not that that's saying much, and she can get dragged down into their usual stupidity. Depending, of course, on the episode, which just shows you that intelligence is all relative on this show. She's usually very kind until you make her angry. You do not want to incur the wrath of Sandy. Time and time again, she's proven that she is a force to be reckoned with. But as long as you treat her nice and don't make fun of Texas, you'll probably get along just fine. A lot of the humor surrounding Sandy comes from the fact that she's a fish out of water, almost literally, although she's kind of the inverse, which I'm sure is an irony not lost on the writers. When it comes to her relationship with SpongeBob, SpongeBob constantly looks up to Sandy and is always trying to prove that he's cool around her. And then I suppose I should mention the science thing. Yeah. To my knowledge, and I've seen all of these episodes many, many times, seasons 1 through 3, of course, she really only exhibits signs of being a scientist in Sandy's rocket. That seems to be about it. Possibly also Tea at the Tree Dome, and that she's studying sea creatures and all that, but aside from those two, there really isn't much other evidence to suggest that she's anything but very intelligent. There's nothing to say that she's not a scientist, per se, but it really isn't that much of her characterization. She is a lot more of an action girl than a scientist. She's a very competitive person, she's very physical, she's very aggressive if you make her mad, but she is a kind soul and definitely one of the smarter creatures in Bikini Bottom. And then that leads us to our very last character, well, very last main character anyway. I don't know, the show has a weird habit of defining what a main character and a side character is. Either way, Plankton! So earlier in this video, I talked about Plankton in regards to the SpongeBob movie and his characterization, and how I think most of the time, he's portrayed as your comically ineffectual villain. He's like microscopic creature that thinks he's a villain. Like, that's just funny. And like I said, even his ambitions are tiny. He is not a rule the world kind of guy. Yeah, he'll occasionally slip into the I want to destroy the world, but really, his goal is to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula. His goal is to take down a fast food restaurant that lives across the street. So I think it goes without saying that he is obviously the main villain of the series, although definitely not the most intimidating or threatening or effectual at all. So basically, he's the perfect villain for a show that doesn't take itself too seriously. In relation to SpongeBob, well, Plankton uses him as an oblivious pawn in most episodes, and it never really seems to work out for him. A lot of times it just seems like bad luck for poor Plankton, not like he really does anything wrong, although you could argue that anyone who puts a self-destruct coin slot in their robot machine probably has it coming. One of the things I love about Plankton is that whenever he's around, he usually brings science fiction to the show. Like in his initial episode where he tries to control SpongeBob's mind, and then another episode where he tries to put SpongeBob's brain in a robot. He brings a lot of science fiction and fantasy elements into the show, and it's always fun. And surprisingly enough, because he's made so ineffectual, he's kind of sympathetic at times. And whenever we get to see things from his perspective, you almost kind of root for the little guy. You gotta admire how persistent he is. And seeing as Mr. Krabs is no angel, sometimes he can come off like a better person. So, Plankton is a tiny, ineffectually evil, hammy, over-the-top, science fiction-loving villain. Very briefly, I'd like to touch on each of the recurring characters. Starting with Mrs. Puff. She has an actually pretty sizable role for a quote-unquote recurring character. She's most commonly seen in SpongeBob's boating school episodes, although she has been known to fill in a few crowd scenes, and she's done a few other things in the course of the series. She's shown to be incredibly nervous and shaky whenever SpongeBob is behind the wheel, for good reason of course, and as the series progresses, she is shown to have quite the hatred for SpongeBob, and honestly, I don't really find it mean-spirited or out of character at all. SpongeBob is a pest, it's not really that much of a surprise, and poor Mrs. Puff actually has to put up with him and is repeatedly sent to jail over his antics. It's no wonder why she'd be so angry at him all the time. And for the most part, at least outwardly, she keeps her kind, teaching demeanor. So basically, she seems to care for SpongeBob insofar as you can care for someone that's been driving you crazy and getting you sent to jail repeatedly. And like pretty much every character on this show, she has a tendency to go off the deep end from time to time. Alright, next on to Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. They don't appear in any episodes, seasons 1 through 3, that don't have Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy in the name, so it's easy to tell that they're not in very many episodes. They're basically comic book superheroes that are now retired, and they're an amalgamation of a lot of different things, like the campy Batman and Aquaman. They don't seem to like SpongeBob and Patrick very much, but in some episodes they decide that, hey, they're just crazy kids and they should throw them a bone. Again, not so much to go on when the characters appear in 5 episodes. Interestingly enough, though, these are like the only episodes to really feature any sort of continuity, aside from maybe like Tea at the Tree Dome introducing Sandy, and really the only continuity comes from the fact that it's the same characters and they still recognize SpongeBob and Patrick. Much like how some Plankton's episodes embrace science fiction, these episodes embrace comic books full on, and go to show how diverse a show SpongeBob is. They're usually good parody material, they've got some funny action scenes, and they're some of the best episodes the show has to offer. And the characters are great too. Karen. Karen is Plankton's computer wife. They say behind every evil scientist genius lies a computer simulating a female there to make life a little bit more tolerable. Karen is more intelligent than Plankton, and really if it were up to her, she probably could have stolen the Krabby Patty formula long ago, but I don't think she really cares. She likes helping Plankton, and she also likes snarking at him, but I don't think she's actually that invested in stealing the Krabby Patty formula. She really doesn't do much outside of that, though, and being a computer, she has very little personality, although she is definitely snarky towards Plankton. The Flying Dutchman. He doesn't appear much, and his characterization, for the most part, doesn't go beyond, spooky ghost. So that's about all I have to say on him. Alright, so Pearl. She doesn't appear in very many episodes, and in fact, a lot of episodes seem to forget that Mr. Krabs has a daughter, like episodes where he's placed into mortal danger. She's not mentioned at all, which is a little bit strange considering you'd think she'd be, like, by his hospital bedside. She seems to exist to A, make jokes at teenagers, which, honestly, I don't think they do very well, and B, give Mr. Krabs another excuse to be cheap. Pearl is your typical bubbly teenage girl. She's moody, she's into dating guys, she's just very stereotypically a teenager. She's not the most fleshed out character. In relation to SpongeBob, she finds him annoying, but has been able to bond with him in a few episodes. And her relationship with her dad, it seems to be pretty good. She gets a little bit upset when he's incredibly cheap around her friends, but other than that, nothing very interesting going on here. And last but certainly not least, we have Patchy the Pirate and Potty the Parrot. So the two appear in the special episodes of Season 2 and 3. They do a lot of slapstick comedy, they're often at each other's throats, and it all feels like it's done in that sort of cheesy, live-action, low-budget kids show type thing. At their best, they're slapstick gold. At their worst, they're just kind of mildly irritating while you wait for the SpongeBob part of the episode to come back. And that's all of the important characters in SpongeBob Seasons 1 through 3. It's worth noting that all of the characters have a few things in common, like they're all prone to snapping and going crazy at a moment's notice. Pretty much every character has been pushed to the extreme at one point or another. And similarly, every character has had an episode where they're the antagonist. It shows how flexible a show and how flexible the characters are if they can be believable bad guys in any given episode. Now, not necessarily take over the world, kill everyone bad guys, but definitely antagonists. Even SpongeBob has a few. So, that's all I have to say on the characters of SpongeBob and how they acted in Seasons 1 through 3. So we're about to reach a very controversial area here in the reviews. Up till now, it's been fairly easy, but I have a lot of people to please, and I want to try to make all of you happy. I want to try to make the people who absolutely love new SpongeBob happy, and I want to make the people who absolutely hate new SpongeBob happy. And the only way I can do that is just by being honest. Now, I know a lot of you think that I can't be non-biased about the new episodes, considering how much I've said in the past that I just hate them so much. And the thing about that is, the episodes that I watched, the episodes that I reviewed, I stand by my opinion. Those episodes are terrible. Spongehenge and Splinter and Frozen Faces, those episodes are just awful. They are miserable excuses for entertainment. Not even a SpongeBob episode. They're just terrible. But then again, they were voted the worst of the worst, so I don't really know what I was expecting. Now, there's something else I need to tell specifically to the people who like new SpongeBob and don't understand why people hate on it so much. Whether or not Seasons 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, however many they go on to have in the second movie, are terrible, they are not, in a lot of people's eyes, SpongeBob. And I agree. It's not. It is a completely different show. The characters sound different, the characters act different, the writing is different, the people behind the show has changed. It is not the same show that we grew up with. Maybe it's just as good, maybe it's better, but it's not the same show. And to see something that a lot of us in my age group hold very, very dear be warped into something else, something that is obviously very marketable for Nickelodeon, is just really heartbreaking in a way that I don't know that you'll ever understand. It's not the same. It is not what I would call SpongeBob SquarePants. But PieGuy, aren't you judging it a bit prematurely? No. I've seen actually all of Season 4, all of Season 5, which surprised me when I looked at the list and recognized all the episodes, and a good portion of Season 6. So I do have some idea of what's coming. And in every single episode that I have seen, it's different. Maybe not always bad, but different. And I think that is a very important distinction to make. That's why I talked about how the characters acted, not to show that they're any better or worse, just that they're different, just that the show took on a different life in its renewal. And I think you need to try and understand that if you ever want to understand where the haters are coming from. It's not just about the quality, it's also partially about how this is something with the name and facade of something that we hold very dear, but it is very, very different. Now I want to address the people that absolutely hate the new SpongeBob. I want you guys to be open, because I'm going to be open here. I want to try and just watch these episodes and enjoy them for what they are. I want to try and see if there's any diamonds in the rough here. Maybe most of them are terrible. Maybe what everyone's been saying has been true all along, but if I can find just 1 or 2 episodes from a later season that I actually enjoy, then this'll all be worth it, and at least now I won't be a hypocrite because I'll have seen all the episodes. So I ask you to not necessarily give it a try with me, but if I say I really liked an episode, go out and check it out. Maybe not all of it's bad. Is it worth it if there ends up being 96 terrible, terrible episodes just for 5 or 6 good ones to come out? Not necessarily, but it is what it is. SpongeBob exists. SpongeBob existed a long time after the initial run, and it's something we just have to accept. So I say embrace it and try to look for the good in it. And lastly, to everyone, SpongeBob will always be a gigantic joke. Whether the episodes are good or bad, Nickelodeon abuses the sponge. Nickelodeon airs him over and over and over again, wrings him out for every little piece of merchandise, SpongeBob underwear or whatever. It's a joke. It will always be a joke. Even if the show's good, even if the show's bad, SpongeBob will always be a joke thanks to Nickelodeon not handling him properly. So, thanks again to Encyclopedia SpongeBobia for their wealth of information on SpongeBob. Thanks again to Incompetech for the awesome music. And SpongeBuddy Mania, especially. And these people in particular, as they actually helped me write this episode. The text that you saw on the screen was their word-for-word description. I didn't change any of it. And also thanks to TV Tropes for the description of Flanderization. See you in Season 4. PieGuyRulz,